They always tell you funerals are for the living. I didn't understand what that meant until I stood over my daughter's casket, watching the last of the flowers shake in the cold wind, and realized I wasn't just burying Emily. I was burying a version of my life where I still believed people could be decent. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes everything look tired. The preacher's voice floated over us, soft and careful, like he was afraid a louder word might crack the whole day open. My hands were shaking so badly I had to lock them together. In front of me, Grant, my son-in-law, stood tall, dressed in black like everyone else, but there was something about him that didn't match the moment. His posture was too straight. His face was too clean. And his eyes kept moving, not toward the casket, toward me. When the last prayer ended and people began to drift away, some crying, some silent, I stayed, because I couldn't leave her yet. I couldn't. That's when Grant stepped close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne cutting through the scent of wet soil. He didn't look at the grave. He looked at my face. He leaned in like he was about to comfort me, like he was about to say something kind. Instead, he whispered, calm and cold, "You have 48 hours to get out." At first, I didn't even understand him. Get out? Out of where? Then it hit me like a slap. My house. Emily's childhood home. The place I'd lived for 30 years. The place I had let Emily and Grant stay in the last few months, because Emily was sick and wanted to be close to me, close to familiar walls, close to memories that didn't hurt. I stared at him, sure I'd heard wrong. But he didn't blink. He just gave me a small smile, like he'd won something, and added in the same quiet voice, "Don't make this ugly, David. 2 days. That's generous." Then he walked away at my daughter's funeral, like he had just reminded me to pay a bill. And I stood there frozen, with my daughter in the ground, and my son-in-law trying to throw me out of my own life. My chest burned. My throat tightened. I wanted to yell. I wanted to grab him by the collar and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something inside me, something old, something stubborn, whispered back, "Okay, 2 days. You just gave me a deadline. And I'm going to use every second of it." I went home that night with the sound of his threat still in my ears. And I made a decision. If Grant wanted me gone in 48 hours, then in 48 hours, he was going to learn what happens when you threaten the wrong father. And he was going to pay. Emily was my only child. When my wife passed away years ago, it was just Emily and me in that house. We learned how to live around the empty spaces. We learned how to laugh again, even when it felt wrong. Emily had my wife's smile, the kind that made strangers soften without knowing why. And she had my stubbornness. So when she brought Grant home for the first time, I tried, really tried, to keep an open mind. Grant was polite on the surface, always saying the right thing, always bringing a bottle of wine, always offering to help with the dishes. But I noticed what most people miss, how his eyes would narrow when Emily spoke too long, how he corrected her stories, like he needed to control even the way she remembered things, how he'd squeeze her hand a little too hard when she laughed at something I said. Small things, easy to explain away. And Emily, sweet Emily, always defended him. "He's just stressed, Dad. He's been through a lot. He loves me. You'll see." So I tried. I smiled through dinners. I shook his hand. I told myself I was being protective because I was afraid of losing her. Then Emily got sick. Not the kind of sick you recover from. The kind you try not to name too loudly because it makes it real. It happened fast. Doctor visits, tests, whispered conversations in hospital hallways, treatment plans that sounded hopeful until you notice how carefully the doctors avoided making promises. Emily tried to stay brave, but I saw fear in her eyes late at night when she thought nobody was looking. Grant, on the other hand, became different. At first, he played the perfect husband. He posted online about prayers and strength and faith. People called him devoted, but behind closed doors, I watched him grow impatient. He'd sigh when Emily asked for water. He'd check his phone during her appointments. He'd speak to nurses like they worked for him. And then, one evening, I heard something I can't unhear. Emily and Grant were in the kitchen. I was in the hallway, heading to the living room. Emily's voice was soft, weak, I just want peace, she said. Please. Grant's voice was low and sharp. Peace costs money, Emily. I stopped walking. Emily said, I don't care about money. Grant laughed, just once, short and bitter. You should. That was the first time I felt real cold fear about him. A month later, Emily asked to move back into my house for a while. She said she missed me. She said she wanted to be close. Grant agreed too quickly. He even smiled when he carried boxes inside. But I noticed something else. He didn't bring much of his own, just his laptop, his briefcase, a lockbox I'd never seen before. And he started making calls. Quiet calls, late at night. Sometimes when Emily was asleep, I'd see him at the dining table, paperwork spread out, his face lit by the harsh glow of his screen. When I asked him what he was working on, he'd say, just taking care of things. Things became a word I started to hate. Then Emily died, and at her funeral, Grant gave me 48 hours to get out. So that night, as I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by my daughter's pictures, I asked myself one question. How does a man go from grieving husband to threatening father before the dirt is even settled? I didn't have the answer yet, but I was about to find it. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding head. For a moment, in that half-sleep haze, I forgot Emily was gone. Then I looked at the framed photo on my nightstand. Emily in a yellow dress, laughing in the summer sun, and the truth hit me all over again. I sat up, breathing hard. Then I heard it. Footsteps downstairs. Not careful, not respectful. Grant moved around my house like it already belonged to him. I walked down to the kitchen. He was there, pouring himself coffee in my favorite mug. Without asking, he looked up and smiled like we were normal. Morning, he said. I didn't answer. I stared at him until the smile faded. What was that yesterday? I asked. My voice sounded rough. 48 hours? Grant set the mug down slowly. He leaned back against the counter like he had all the time in the world. It's simple, he said. Emily and I were married. She had rights. And now, he shrugged, I do. You do. I repeated, to my house. He gave me a look like I was slow. Emily signed paperwork. He said, you'll see it soon enough. My stomach tightened. Emily signed paperwork? Emily had been exhausted, medicated, barely able to stand some days. What paperwork? I stepped closer. Show me. Grant's eyes hardened. I don't have to show you anything right now. Then he smiled again, small, cruel. I'm trying to be civil, David. 2 days. Pack your things. Something in me almost snapped right there, but I forced myself to breathe. Why? I asked, why now? Why like this? Grant's gaze flicked toward the hallway, toward Emily's old room, then back to me. Because I need to move forward, he said. And you're in the way. In the way. I repeated like tasting poison. He took a sip of coffee. Don't turn this into a scene. I wanted to scream that my daughter was in the ground. I wanted to tell him that he didn't get to talk about moving forward when he was the one bulldozing through grief like it was trash on the road. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Grant blinked. He hadn't expected that. I turned and walked out of the kitchen before he could read my face. Because inside, my heart was beating with a different kind of energy now. Not just grief. Suspicion. I went straight to my home office and opened my old metal filing cabinet. Emily used to tease me about it. Dad, you keep papers like they're gold. Maybe they were. I started pulling folders. Deed, tax documents, insurance, the will my wife and I had made years ago. Everything was where it should be, except one folder was slightly off, like it had been pulled out and shoved back in a hurry. My hands went cold. I opened it. Some papers looked disturbed. Not missing, but touched, and there, tucked behind an old utility bill, was a document I had never seen before. It was a copy of a property transfer agreement. My name was on it. My address was on it. And the signature at the bottom, supposedly mine, looked like someone had tried to imitate my handwriting. My throat went dry. Then I saw the date. It was from 3 weeks before Emily died. 3 weeks. I sat down slowly, staring at the page, feeling the room tilt, because now I understood exactly what Grant was doing. He wasn't just being cruel. He was executing a plan that started before my daughter was even gone. And if that signature wasn't mine, then it meant only one thing. This wasn't grief. This was a setup, and I had 48 hours to stop it. That afternoon, I didn't confront Grant again. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Martin Collins. Martin was a lawyer, not the flashy kind with billboards and slogans. The quiet kind who sat across from you and listened until the truth started to show itself. When he arrived, I handed him the document with shaking hands. He adjusted his glasses, read it once, then read it again. His face didn't change much, but his eyes did. "David," he said carefully, "where did you get this?" "In my file cabinet," I replied, "where it shouldn't be." He nodded slowly. "The signature doesn't look like yours." "It isn't," I said. Martin exhaled. "If this is forged, it's serious." I leaned forward. "What can I do?" Martin tapped the page. "First, don't let him know you found it." I swallowed. He gave me 2 days. Martin's gaze lifted. "Then we work fast." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to run a few checks. Property records. Any filings. Any changes." While he did that, I stared around my office, noticing things I hadn't noticed before. A faint scratch near my desk drawer, like it had been pried open. A missing spare key from the hook by the door. I felt sick. Grant hadn't just been living in my house. He'd been searching it. Martin looked up from his phone, his face tight. "David," he said, "there's a recent file with the county. A request to update ownership interests." My heart dropped. Meaning he's trying to claim legal standing," Martin said. "He's building a paper trail." I clenched my fists. "He can't." Martin's voice grew firm. "We can challenge it, but we need more than suspicion." I swallowed hard. "What about Emily?" Martin paused. "What about her?" I hesitated, then said it out loud. "I think she knew." I whispered. "I think she was scared. I think she might have tried to warn me." Martin looked at me with something like pity. "Did she ever say anything?" I thought back. The last week of Emily's life, she asked me strange questions. "Dad, where you keep your important papers?" "Dad, if something happens to me, you'll be okay, right?" "Dad, promise me you won't sign anything you don't understand." At the time, I thought it was fear. Now, it sounded like a warning. I stood up suddenly. "Her room," I said. Martin frowned. "What?" "Emily's room," I repeated. "I haven't touched it since she—" My voice caught. "Since she passed." Grant had been staying in the guest room. Emily's old room had been left alone. Or so I thought. I walked down the hall, heart pounding, and opened the door. Her room looked the same. Neat bedspread, books on the shelf, a candle on the dresser. But something was off. The bottom drawer of her dresser wasn't fully closed. My stomach tightened. I pulled it open. Inside were folded sweaters and an old scarf. And beneath them, a plain envelope. No name. Just one word written in Emily's handwriting. "Dad." My hands trembled so badly I almost tore it. I opened it. Inside was a letter. And the first line made my vision blur. If you're reading this, it means Grant went too far. I sank onto the edge of the bed, unable to breathe. Martin stood in the doorway, silent. I read the letter with shaking lips. Emily wrote about Grant changing after she got sick, about him pressuring her to sign things when she was tired, about him talking about what he deserved, about him saying, "Your dad's house is wasted on him." Then came the line that turned my grief into fire. "Dad, I heard him on the phone. He said once I'm gone, you won't have any fight left. He thinks you'll fold." I swallowed a sob. At the bottom, Emily had written one more thing. "There's a flash drive taped under the bottom of my jewelry box. If he tries to take the house, give it to someone you trust." I stood up so fast my knees nearly buckled. I grabbed the jewelry box, flipped it over, and there it was, tape slightly lifted. Under it, a small black flash drive. Grant wasn't just threatening me. He was finishing something he started while my daughter was still alive. And Emily, my brave girl, left me the weapon to stop him. Now, all I had to do was use it before the 48 hours ran out. Martin plugged the flash drive into his laptop at my kitchen table. Grant was out running errands, which meant he was probably meeting someone or filing something else behind my back. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Martin clicked through the files. There were audio recordings, photos, screenshots, even scanned documents. My mouth went dry. Emily did all this? I asked. Martin nodded slowly. Looks like it. He opened an audio file. Grant's voice filled the kitchen, clear as day. I'm not waiting forever. Grant said in the recording. Once it's done, the house is mine. Her dad won't have the energy to fight. Another voice laughed. Male, unfamiliar. You sure she signed? Grant replied, she signed what I put in front of her. Sick people don't read. They trust. My hands curled into fists so tight my nails hurt. Martin stopped the audio and looked at me. This is huge, he said quietly. It shows intent. He opened a folder labeled bank. Inside were screenshots of transfers. Notes Emily had typed. A timeline. Grant had been moving money out of an account Emily had. Not millions, but enough to matter. Some transfers were labeled medical. Others had no label at all. David, Martin said carefully, do you know about an insurance policy? My heart thumped. Emily had life insurance through work. Martin nodded. Grant may be trying to secure everything before anyone asks questions. I swallowed hard. So that was it. The rush, the threats, the coldness. Grant wasn't grieving. He was collecting. Martin closed the laptop gently. Here's what we do, he said. Step 1. We file an emergency notice to block any property transfer until this is investigated. Can we do that today? I asked. Yes, Martin said. Step 2. We report suspected forgery. Step 3. We confront him, but not in anger. I blinked. Not in anger? Martin leaned forward, in a controlled setting, with witnesses, with everything ready. My heart hammered. Like a trap. Martin gave a small nod. Exactly. For the first time since Emily died, I felt something other than helpless. I felt direction. But then Martin added the part that chilled me. David, people like Grant don't stop when they're cornered. He may try to intimidate you again. He may try to twist the story. I stare at the front door, imagining Grant coming back, seeing us at the table, sensing something had changed. What if he tries to throw me out sooner? I asked. Martin's eyes sharpened. Then you don't leave. This is your home. And if he touches you or threatens you again, we document it. I nodded, but my stomach was tight. That night, Martin filed the emergency paperwork. The next morning, I went to the bank and quietly asked for statements, anything I was legally allowed to see. Then I met with Emily's employer's HR department to confirm the insurance beneficiary. When they said Grant's name, my jaw tightened. But then they added one more detail. There was a request to change the beneficiary 2 months ago, the HR woman said, but it was rejected because the form was incomplete. My heart jumped. Rejected? Meaning Grant tried and failed, meaning he was still trying. And then, when I got home, I found Grant sitting in my living room, legs crossed like a king in a borrowed castle. He smiled as I walked in. 24 hours left, he said casually. You packing yet? I looked at him and forced myself to stay calm. Almost. I lied. Grant's smile widened. Good, he said, because after tomorrow I'm changing the locks. I nodded slowly like I was afraid, but inside I wasn't afraid anymore, because he thought he was counting down to my defeat. He didn't know he was counting down to his exposure, and I was about to make sure everyone saw who he really was. The last night of Grant's deadline felt like the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, writing down every step, every detail, every name. Martin had arranged for a meeting the next afternoon, right before the 48 hours would be up. Family discussion. We called it. Grant agreed because he thought it would be my surrender. He even suggested we meet at the house. His house, in his mind. Martin told me to invite a couple of neutral witnesses. So I asked Reverend Stone, the same preacher who had buried Emily, and Mrs. Patel, my neighbor who had known Emily since she was a child. Both of them said yes without hesitation. David, Reverend Stone told me over the phone, I've seen grief make people cruel, but I've also seen truth set people free. We'll be there. That morning, Grant was in a good mood. Too good. He whistled while he ate breakfast, scrolling on his phone like he was shopping. At one point, he said, "After this, I'm thinking of renovations. The place needs a modern touch." I stared at him. Renovations? He nodded. Yeah, might sell it later. Who knows? Sell it. He was already spending my life in his head. Then he added, like it was nothing, Emily would have wanted me to have a fresh start. I had to grip the countertop to keep from shaking. Don't explode, I told myself. Not yet. Let him talk. Let him show his arrogance. Because arrogance makes people careless. Around noon, Grant got a call and stepped outside. I watched through the window. He paced, talking fast, his face annoyed. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. No, he doesn't have anything. He's just an old man. Tomorrow it's done. Old man. That's what he saw when he looked at me. Not a father who buried his child. Just an obstacle with wrinkles. When he came back inside, he caught me watching. His eyes narrowed. What? Nothing, I said. He stared for a second, then smirked. You know, he said, Emily always said you were stubborn. I didn't answer. He leaned in a little. But stubborn doesn't mean smart. Then he walked away. I stood there, heart pounding, and realized something. Grant wasn't nervous. He wasn't cautious. He thought the paperwork was enough. He thought I had no proof. And that meant tomorrow he was going to walk right into the room expecting victory. I spent the afternoon preparing the house like it was a stage. Martin arrived early with printed copies of everything from the flash drive. He placed them in folders. One for the property forgery. One for the money transfers. One for the audio recordings with transcripts. He looked at me and said, Remember, let him speak. Let him dig deeper. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. But what if he denies it? I asked. Martin's mouth tightened. Then we let the evidence answer. By evening, the house felt haunted. Not by Emily, by the idea of what Grant tried to do to her memory. I walked into Emily's room again, just for a moment, and whispered, I'm doing this for you. And in that quiet, I realized something else. Revenge wasn't what I wanted. I wanted justice. I wanted the truth to stand up and slap Grant in the face in front of the world. Because the worst punishment for a man like that isn't shouting. It's exposure. It's watching his mask crack while he can't stop it. The next day was coming. And Grant still thought I was the one with no options. He had no idea that in a few hours, he would be sitting in my living room with his own voice turned against him. And when he realized, it would already be too late. At exactly 3 p.m., Grant walked into the living room wearing a confident smile. He wore a crisp shirt like it was a business meeting, not a conversation about a dead wife. He looked around and froze when he saw Reverend Stone and Mrs. Patel sitting on the couch. Then his eyes landed on Martin, standing near the fireplace with a folder in his hands. Grant's smile faltered. What is this? Grant asked. I kept my voice steady. A conversation. With witnesses. Grant's jaw tightened. I didn't agree to this. Martin stepped forward calmly. Actually, you agreed to a meeting at this address. And here we are. Grant's gaze snapped to me, sharp and angry now. You planning to embarrass yourself, David? He hissed. I sat down slowly in my armchair. No, I said, I'm planning to stop you. Grant laughed, but it sounded forced. Stop me from what? He said loudly, glancing at the others like they were ridiculous. This man is confused. He's grieving. He doesn't understand the legal situation. Mrs. Patel's eyes narrowed. Legal situation? She repeated. Grant straightened. Emily and I. Martin held up a hand. Before you continue, Mr. Grant, we should clarify something. Grant rolled his eyes. Oh, please. Martin opened the folder and pulled out the property transfer document. Do you recognize this? Martin asked. Grant barely glanced at it. Yes, that's the agreement your client signed. Martin nodded. Interesting. He turned the page toward Grant and pointed. This signature is not David's, Martin said, and we have already filed an emergency block to prevent any ownership change until an investigation is complete. Grant's face tightened, but he tried to recover. That's ridiculous, he snapped. Of course it is. Reverend Stone leaned forward slightly. Then why threaten him with 48 hours at a funeral? He asked, his voice calm but cutting. Grant's eyes flashed. I didn't. Mrs. Patel interrupted. You did, she said firmly. I heard you. I was standing nearby. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. I felt my heart pounding, but I kept my tone even. Grant, I said, you picked the wrong time and the wrong place to show your real face. Grant pointed at me. You're twisting things. Martin didn't raise his voice. He just reached into the folder again. Let's move to the next point, he said. He placed printed bank statements on the table. Do you recognize these transfers? Martin asked. Grant stared at the papers, then scoffed. That's private. Martin nodded. It was your wife's account, and we have records showing repeated transfers to accounts linked to you. Grant's hands clenched. Then Martin said, and now, the part that makes denial difficult. He clicked a small speaker on. Grant's voice filled the room. I'm not waiting forever once it's done. The house is mine. Her dad won't have the energy to fight. The room went dead silent. Grant went pale, actually pale. His eyes darted wildly. Martin played the next line. She signed what I put in front of her. Sick people don't read. They trust. Reverend Stone's face hardened. Mrs. Patel gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. Grant lunged forward. Turn that off. Martin didn't. He let it play just a few more seconds. Then he stopped it and looked Grant dead in the eye. Those recordings, Martin said, have been submitted with our report. Grant's breathing was heavy now, like an animal cornered. He spun toward me, voice shaking with rage. You went through her stuff? He barked. I stood up slowly. No, I said. Emily left it for me. Grant froze. I stepped closer, my voice low. She knew, I said. She knew what you were doing. She knew you were counting on her death to break me. Grant's eyes flicked to the others, realizing, finally, that his image was collapsing in real time. He tried one last move. He laughed, sharp and ugly. Fine, he said. You want war? You'll lose. I'll drag this out. Martin's face didn't change. You can try, he said, but the county has already flagged your filings. The bank is reviewing the transfers, and Emily's employer has been notified of attempted beneficiary manipulation. Grant blinked rapidly. His confidence was gone, and for the first time I saw fear in him. Real fear, because he understood something now. This wasn't a private fight anymore. This was documented. Witness. Filed. The kind of truth that doesn't go away. Grant swallowed hard and forced out. You think people will believe an old man over me? Mrs. Patel stood up, voice trembling with anger. I watched that girl grow up, she said, and I believe her. I believe her letter. I believe her proof. And I will tell anyone who asks what kind of man you are. Grant's shoulders sagged slightly. His mask was cracked, and he knew everyone could see underneath. I looked at him and said the words I'd been holding for 2 days. You wanted me out in 48 hours. I paused, letting the silence sharpen. Well, Grant, your time is up. Grant didn't get led away in handcuffs that day. Life isn't always that neat. But he did lose what mattered most to him. Control, reputation, access, and the fantasy that he could erase Emily and walk away richer. After the meeting, Martin escorted Grant to the door and told him plainly, you are no longer welcome in this home. Any attempt to enter will be treated as trespassing. Grant tried to argue, but Reverend Stone stepped in and said, go. And something about hearing that word, from a man who had just buried his wife, broke Grant's last bit of pride. He left, not with a dramatic scream, not with a final threat. He left the way cowards often do when the truth shows up, quietly, with tight shoulders and a stiff walk, like he was trying to outrun shame. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, exhausted. Mrs. Patel had hugged me before she left, tears in her eyes. Reverend Stone had placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your daughter would be proud." Martin stayed a little longer to go over next steps. There would be investigations, paperwork, interviews. It would take time. But Grant's claim on the house was frozen. The forged document was now evidence, not a weapon. And the money transfers were under review. Grant tried to fight it first, through nasty messages, through a couple of aggressive calls. But once he realized the situation was bigger than me, he backed off. Because the kind of man who relies on threats doesn't do well when people start asking questions. A few weeks later, Emily's employer finalized the insurance process, and because of the suspicious attempts and the ongoing investigation, nothing moved quickly. Grant didn't get his payout in a clean, easy way. He didn't get his fresh start. Instead, he got delays, scrutiny, and a spotlight. And in that spotlight, he couldn't hide. One night, after a long day of meetings and calls, I went into Emily's room again. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her letter. I read it once more, but slower, letting every word sink in. And I cried, not just because I missed her, but because she had been carrying fear and still had the strength to protect me, even as she was fading. I whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Then I realized something important. Grant didn't just want my house. He wanted my silence. He wanted me to feel too broken to stand up. He wanted me to fold into grief and disappear. But grief doesn't always make you weak. Sometimes grief turns into a kind of fire. A fire that says, if I couldn't protect them in life, I will protect their truth after. That was my revenge. Not screaming. Not violence. Just a truth placed carefully like a trap and sprung at the right moment. And here's the lesson I want you to take from this story. When someone shows you cruelty in your lowest moment, believe them. When someone rushes you, pressures you, threatens you, especially when you're grieving, pause. Breathe. Look closer. Because good people don't need to bully you into signing, leaving, or giving up what's yours. And if you ever find yourself facing someone like Grant, remember this. The most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight like them. It's to expose them, to document, to stay calm while you build the truth piece by piece. Because a liar can argue with your anger, but a liar can't argue with their own voice on a recording. Grant gave me 48 hours. He thought it was the end of my story, but it was the beginning of his consequences. And as for me, I still live in that house. Emily's house. My house. Not as a victory prize, but as a promise kept. Because some homes aren't just walls. They're proof that love was real. And no threat, no matter how cold, gets to take that away.